Hello everyone. Today we're going to talk about a very special topic. One that perhaps all of us have experienced at some point in our lives. The psychology of people who can't be alone. Yes, you heard right. I know it might sound a little strange at first. You might say, people who can't be alone. But believe me, this situation is much more common than you think, and is a very deep psychological issue. Let's think about it together. What's the first thing you do when you wake up in the morning? Check your phone, right? Look at your messages. See what people have posted on social media. But have you ever thought about why you do this? Maybe you're escaping silence, escaping being alone. This fear of loneliness, known as autophobia or monophobia, has become one of the most common psychological problems of the modern age. And I must say, there is a huge difference between being afraid of being alone and not liking loneliness. If you watch this video to the end, you will understand this difference very clearly. Now, let's take a deep dive into this topic together. First, let's clarify this. People who can't be alone aren't bad people. No, on the contrary, they are often extremely affectionate, social, and interesting individuals. But something is missing. There is a void. And this void is constantly being filled by the presence of others. Think about it. Every evening when you come home, you want someone to be waiting for you. Eating dinner alone feels like torture. Instead of spending time alone on weekends, you feel compelled to make plans with someone. Going to the movies alone doesn't even cross your mind. So why is this the case? Why do some people see being alone as a chance to relax and unwind, while for others it's practically a nightmare? The answer usually lies in childhood. Yes, we're back to childhood traumas. But believe me, the importance of childhood is undisputed in almost every field of psychology. The experiences you have as a child largely shape who you become as an adult. Think of a child who can't be alone. Their parents are constantly fighting, and there's tension at home when they come back. Or, on the contrary, their family is very protective and never leaves the child alone. Perhaps the child was left alone for long periods of time as a child, and this situation remained a traumatic experience for them. Do you know what happens to these children when they become adults? They associate loneliness with abandonment. For them, being alone means not being loved. It means not being wanted. It means being insignificant. And right here, a deep fear develops within them. This fear is so powerful that it affects every aspect of their lives. Let me give you a real-life example. I have a friend. Let's call her Sabrina. Sabrina is very active on social media. She constantly attends events, meets up with friends, and shares photos. From the outside, she seems very happy and very social. But one day I asked her, Sabrina, do you ever spend time alone at home? Her answer was very interesting. I can't, she said. When I'm alone, bad thoughts come into my head. I feel worthless. I feel like nobody loves me. Nobody wants me. It's a perfect example of what goes on inside the minds of people who can't be alone. When Sabrina is alone, she has to face herself. And this confrontation is very difficult for her because loneliness leaves us alone with ourselves, with our thoughts, our fears, our shortcomings, and sometimes this can be unbearable. So what do these people do to avoid being alone? Let me tell you about some very striking behavioral patterns in this regard. First, constantly being in a relationship. People who cannot stand being alone jump into a new relationship as soon as one ends. Sometimes, not even days pass. You might ask, how is that possible? But for them, it's not the quality of the relationship that matters. It's the fact that they have one. Because being alone is much more frightening to them than being by themselves. Second, putting up with toxic relationships. Yes, you heard right. People who can't stand being alone prefer to stay in unhealthy, sometimes even harmful relationships. Because for them, a bad relationship is better than no relationship at all. The thought, at least I have someone by my side, trumps everything else. Third, social media addiction. They constantly check their phones. They wait for messages to come in. They constantly need other people's comments and likes. Because every notification sends them the message, you are not alone. Someone is thinking of you. Fourth, Excessive sociability. Every invitation is accepted. Every event is attended. Saying no is almost impossible, because turning down an invitation carries the risk of being left alone. Fifth, difficulty making decisions. People who cannot be alone often struggle to make decisions on their own. They constantly need the opinions of others, because making a decision alone is another version of being alone. Now let's take a closer look at the psychological background of this situation. There is a concept called attachment theory, developed by John Bowlby. This theory explains how relationships formed with caregivers in childhood shape relationships in adulthood. There are three main attachment styles. Secure attachment. These people can comfortably balance both closeness and autonomy. They are not afraid of being alone. They also enjoy close relationships. Anxious attachment. These people constantly fear abandonment. They constantly seek approval from their partners. And yes, people who cannot be alone usually fall into this category. Avoidant attachment. These people fear intimacy. They avoid getting too close. Interestingly, they also cannot cope with loneliness in a sense, but in a different way. People who cannot be alone usually have an anxious attachment style. Inconsistent behavior from caregivers in childhood, sometimes showing affection and sometimes being indifferent, has created a deep sense of insecurity in these people. And this insecurity has turned into the belief in adulthood that if I am alone, no one will love me. I will be abandoned. So is this situation purely psychological? No, neuroscience also offers some very interesting findings on this subject. Research shows that social isolation and loneliness activate the brain's pain centers. In other words, being alone literally causes pain. Physical pain and emotional pain are processed in the same areas of the brain, and there's more. Loneliness raises cortisol levels. Cortisol is the stress hormone. Persistently high cortisol levels can lead to a host of health problems: heart disease, high blood pressure, weakened immune system, so people who can't be alone are truly suffering. Not just psychologically, but also physiologically. And this makes their behavior more understandable, doesn't it? Now let's look at the social dimension. How does the modern world affect people who can't be alone? We live in the age of social media. Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok. We are constantly connected to each other. But at the same time, we are lonelier than ever. Isn't that a paradox? We have hundreds of friends on our phones, but how many people can we actually talk to? We constantly message each other, but how much time do we spend face to face? For people who can't be alone, social media is both a blessing and a curse. On the one hand, it offers the possibility of constant connection. But on the other hand, it brings constant comparison, constant seeking of approval, constant questioning of, am I enough? And the worst part is, social media doesn't replace real closeness. Yes, you can constantly message people, but it doesn't replace real human contact. And people who can't be alone struggle to face this reality. So, is it possible to get out of this situation? Absolutely yes, but it's not easy. It takes courage and dedication. Here are some suggestions. 1. Face yourself. Yes, this is difficult, but it's necessary. You need to understand why you're afraid of being alone. You may need the help of a therapist, but embarking on this journey is the first step toward change too. Start with small steps. Don't try to spend a whole weekend alone all at once. Start with an hour, then an evening, then a day. Slowly learn to be alone. 3. Learn to enjoy being alone. Read a book, watch a movie, go for a walk, meditate. Discover that being alone is actually a gift. Point 4. Set boundaries. You don't have to accept every invitation. Learn to say no. This will be difficult at first, but it will get easier with time. 5. Value yourself. Your worth is not measured by the attention others give you. You are valuable on your own. Internalizing this is the most important step. Point 6. Seek professional help. If the situation is really serious, don't hesitate to see a psychologist or psychiatrist. This is not a weakness, it is a sign of strength. Now let's take a look at the philosophical dimension. What is loneliness? Some philosophers say that humans are lonely by nature. No one can enter another person's mind. We can never truly understand each other. According to this view, loneliness is inevitable. But I disagree. Yes, each of our inner worlds is unique. But that doesn't mean we can't connect. Empathy, love, understanding. These are the bridges that connect us. The real problem is this: not understanding the difference between loneliness and being alone. Being alone is a physical state. There is no one around you. But this does not necessarily mean you feel lonely. Loneliness, on the other hand, is an emotional state. You can feel lonely even in the middle of a crowd, and the key point here is being at peace with yourself, loving yourself, feeling sufficient in yourself. I want to share another true story. Oliver is a 35-year-old software developer. For years, he jumped from one relationship to another. He could never be alone. Whenever a relationship ended, he immediately found a new one. But one day, after the end of a relationship, he did something different. He decided to be alone. The first few days were very difficult. He constantly checked his phone, called his ex-girlfriend, and sent messages to his friends. But after a while, something strange happened. Slowly, he began to enjoy being alone. He started doing the hobbies he had been putting off for a long time. He learned to play the guitar. He made time to read books. He started talking to himself and listening to himself. And 6 months later, he was a completely different person. For the first time in his life, he didn't need a relationship. He might have wanted one, but he didn't need it. And that difference changed everything. Now Oliver is in a healthy relationship, but this time, he chooses to be with his partner, not out of necessity. And his relationship is healthier than ever. Another characteristic of people who cannot be alone is this: they are usually very empathetic and sensitive individuals. This may seem like a paradox, but it actually makes a lot of sense. Someone who constantly needs the approval of others naturally pays close attention to the feelings of others. They try to make them happy. They take care not to upset them. But this can also mean neglecting their own needs. And this is unsustainable in the long run. Someone who constantly lives for others will one day realize they have lost their own life. The question is, how do you strike a balance? Caring about others and caring about yourself. That's where true maturity lies. Let's look at some findings in neuroscience. There's a hormone called oxytocin. It is also known as the love hormone. Oxytocin is released when we form social bonds, when we hug someone, when we spend time with someone we love. And this makes us feel good. People who cannot be alone may be addicted to this oxytocin rush. They may constantly seek this feeling, wanting to be with others to release this hormone. But here's the interesting part. Oxytocin is not only released when interacting with others, but also when we are kind to ourselves. So, when you treat yourself well, when you love yourself, when you spend quality time with yourself, you can release the same hormone. What does this mean? You don't have to look for happiness outside yourself. You can find it within yourself. We should also talk about social pressures. Society praises being constantly connected, being social, being outgoing. Being a loner or a lonely woman is generally seen as a negative thing, as if you were somehow lacking. But this is nonsense. Being introverted, enjoying solitude, taking pleasure in spending time alone is not a weakness. On the contrary, being able to be happy on your own is a sign of strength. Unfortunately, social pressures can make people who cannot be alone feel even worse. Thoughts like, everyone is in a relationship. Why am I not? Or everyone is hanging out with their friends. Why am I at home? Lead to feelings of worthlessness. But remember this: what you see on social media is only 10% of people's lives. Everyone has moments when they are alone at home, alone with themselves. They just don't share those moments now. Let's look at the dynamics in the relationships of people who cannot be alone. These people are usually very self-sacrificing partners. They are ready to do anything. They constantly try to make the other person happy. But this is not healthy, because a relationship should be reciprocal. If one side is constantly giving and the other side is constantly taking, the balance is broken. And in the long run, the giving side becomes exhausted. Furthermore, people who cannot be alone often struggle to set boundaries in their relationships. They cannot say no. They accept everything the other person wants, because refusing increases the risk of being abandoned. But this means losing their sense of self. And one day when they look in the mirror, they won't recognize themselves. They won't be able to answer questions like, who am I? What do I want? What are my dreams? We should also talk about dependency. Yes, not being able to be alone is a type of dependency. Relationship dependency. People dependency. Whatever you call it, the result is the same. Being dependent on the presence of others. And like any dependency, this is unhealthy. Because you are not in control. Your happiness depends on someone else's behavior. And that is a life built on very fragile foundations. So how do you break free from this dependency? The first step is awareness. Saying, yes, I have a problem with this. This is a difficult step for the ego, but it is essential. The second step is to seek help. Therapy, support groups, books, videos. Whatever works for you. The third step is to practice. Practice being alone. Learn to spend time with yourself. And this will take time, but it is not impossible. Let's also touch on the spiritual dimension. Many spiritual traditions view solitude as a path to enlightenment. Meditation, worship, silent retreat, all of these require being alone. Why? Because when you are alone, the external noise stops. You hear your inner voice. You discover who you truly are. In Buddhism, there is the concept of shunyata, emptiness. And this emptiness is not frightening, but empowering. Because in emptiness, anything is possible. You can recreate, you can start over. In Sufism, there is the concept of halvet and ziva. By being alone, you get to know your soul, purify yourself. So solitude is actually a gift. But we can only understand this once we overcome our fear. Now, let me suggest some practical exercises. 1. Loneliness journal. Every day. Write down how you feel when you are alone. What thoughts come to mind? What emotions? Over time, you will see a pattern too. 5-minute meditation. Every day, just sit quietly for 5 minutes. Observe your mind. Observe your thoughts. Don't try to do anything, just observe. 3. Solo activities. Once a week, plan an activity for yourself alone. Go to a cafe. Go to a museum. Go for a walk in nature. Meet yourself. 4. Digital detox. At least 1 hour a day. Turn off all your devices. Stay away from social media, messages, notifications. Just be with yourself. 5. Practice saying no. This week, decline an invitation you really don't want to attend. Practice saying no. And you'll see that the world doesn't end. In conclusion, friends, people who can't be alone aren't bad people. They just haven't yet learned how to be at peace with themselves. And that's something that can be learned. Society constantly tells us, being alone is bad. You must always be social. But the truth is, you need to know how to be with others and with yourself. Balance is the key to everything. Being social is beautiful. Relationships, friendships, love, all of these enrich our lives. But knowing how to be alone with yourself is also essential. Because in the end, the only person who is truly by your side is yourself. Loneliness is not a curse. It is a blessing. It is an opportunity to discover yourself, to grow, to evolve. If you are someone who cannot be alone, be kind to yourself. Don't judge yourself. But at the same time, dare to change. Because true happiness is not outside, it is inside. Thank you very much for watching this video. I hope it has given you food for thought on this subject. Perhaps even made you question yourself. If this video was helpful to you, don't forget to like it and subscribe. And in the comments, share your experiences with loneliness with me. Maybe you'll inspire others. See you in the next video. Take care of yourself. And remember, being alone is not loneliness. It is meeting yourself goodbye.